My name is Heather Stevens. I'm the manager at the Millbrook Cultural and Heritage Centre, located in Millbrook, Nova Scotia. My position is the manager, so I look after my staff, plus I look after a lot of the funding applications that I need to run the actual Heritage Centre, because the Heritage Centre is a funding-based organization. We are run by our community, but they are there to help to advise, not to contribute funds. So it's always me looking out to try to find the money to sustain us, plus also to do workshops and such, to spread our culture, our history, to people that are wanting to know it. The repatriation happened just this year, but it took me upwards probably about almost 11 years to get it home. But it started way back when. I mean, it started back in like 2000. And so when it started, it was like a glimmer in people's eyes. You know, they were like, whoa, we can get this back. It's in Australia. Let's do this. Let's work together on it. Let's get this done. And then for some reason, I don't really have the actual answers, but I think it kind of like dissolved because it wasn't like money or interest more than just within the community. I could be wrong, which I probably am. But in 2006 and 8, it started to come up again. And I've got little documentation on it, on what actually happened. But when I started here in 2012, I was just a co-op student when I started here. I was taking a tourism, hospitality and management course at the community college in Truro here. And so we had a 6-month term that we had to do, and I chose this place because originally I am from the United States. So growing up, my grandfather was a victim of the residential schools, and he really didn't have a whole lot of history to share because he didn't know it. So when we came up here, I didn't know much about myself, much about my culture. And when I had the opportunity to come here and learn about that, I jumped on it. I jumped on it so fast. So when I was here, I did a lot of learning, but what captured my eye was this regalia. This regalia because it's so beautiful. In the display case, it said it was ceremonial clothing and that it was here and all this stuff. But when I looked at the display case, it was just a picture. And I was like, well, what? Why is it just a picture? Because it's stating that it's here. Why is it telling something and I can see something different? So then I went to the management and I probed, because I am one of these people that wants to get answers when I have a question, even if it's just I don't know. So I went to management and asked, and they said, honestly, they said it's none of my business because I am just a co-op student and it doesn't matter to me. So I was like, I was defeated. I felt defeated at that point in time. But then I walked out of that office and I said, it is my business because I am a Mi'kmaq person and I need to know why it's not here. So then I finished out my term here and I finished the tourism management course, graduated, and they actually hired me back full-time here. And I was so excited to do that because that was still my interest. I still wanted to know about that. Then things happened and it dissolved. Prior ownership was between Nova Scotia Tourism, so we did have a visitor information center here. And then we also had a gift shop that was more focused on like tourism-y stuff. So when they dissolved, Millbrook took it over in 2015 and placed me in management position. And when they did, it was like my free-for-all. I was like, no, this is not, I don't think this is what Chief Lawrence Paul wanted for this place. You know, I think his vision was much different than what this place looks like. So I took it upon myself and I removed the Visitor Information Center and I removed all of the trinkets that were for Nova Scotia Tourism. After that, that's when I started to have the time to divulge myself into the regalia and find out why it's not here. So I did. I took it upon myself and I called the Melbourne Museum and I spoke to the Indigenous woman on the Indigenous side of the museum. Her name was Genevieve Greaves. And I just talked to her as if I'm talking to anybody. You know, I'm a Mi'kmaq person, I'm from Nova Scotia, you know, what nation are you from? Those type of small talk things. So I wasn't calling for the regalia. I was calling to make a connection because I knew that she was Indigenous. And to do that is what I've been taught and I love, and that's part of our culture, you know, we just kind of connect and we talk. About the third or fourth time I was talking to her, she actually asked me again, what nation are you from? And I said, I'm from the Mi'kmaq Nation in the Atlantic provinces from Nova Scotia. And she said, you know what, after I left you, after a couple of conversations we had, I went and I looked because something actually piqued my interest. And I looked and I thought, we do have something from Nova Scotia. And so she said, I just wanted to make sure from you that you were Mi'kmaq from Nova Scotia. I said, yeah. And then she told me what it was. It was this regalia. And oh my gosh, I just freaked when she said it, because I said to her, I said, oh my gosh, you know what? I knew it was down there, but I didn't know if you still had it, type thing. And she said, no, we have it. It's safekeeping. And I said, well, I'd really like to get it home. She says, I can help you with that. And oh my gosh, my heart just sunk. I was like, it sunk, but not really sunk. It was just like unbelievable feeling. I was like, are you serious? This is really gonna happen? So then she actually told me that she was going on maternity leave, and it kind of defeated me there. I was like, okay, so who's gonna take over for you? And it was kind of like 2-3 months before I actually had my new contacts. It was 4 beautiful Indigenous women from the same area. And they picked me up, they took me under their wing, and they taught me everything that I needed to know to bring this regalia home to us. And so it was a lot of conversations back and forth. Now with the government, I actually had to ask the government for help because I didn't have the funding, and I knew it was going to take a lot of money to bring it back home. So I didn't even know how to do that because I knew it was the first international repatriation that was going to happen in Nova Scotia. And they didn't have any idea what that meant or what was entailed. So it was a learning curve for the government as well as me. So thank goodness for Melbourne Museum because they've been through this. So they helped me from beginning to end to get this home. But there was a lot of bumps and curves and hills and ditches and all kinds of things that I had to go through, and a lot of banging my head, a lot of tears, a lot of happiness. I had spoke to former MP Bill Casey about the regalia and how it was in Australia. So he developed a private member's bill, kind of helping it was like a template for First Nations people to get our artifacts back from North America. So he went in front of the House and he spoke in front of the House. It was like 2 minutes and 34 seconds, and it was passed unanimously in the House, the very first reading. Okay, and then I was invited to go in front of the House and speak to the House on my behalf on why it's important for me. But then I just spoke about my experience with Genevieve and all of these things, right? So then after that, that's when it actually started to really hit home that with Bill Casey's help, that I could actually move this along, because during his speech, the Prime Minister of Melbourne, of the Queensland, was there. And she was like, okay, I'm gonna help this, I'm gonna make this come home. So it was like all the cards kind of came together, for this to happen. And so just before COVID hit, meaning the ones from Melbourne, there's 4 board of directors that they had to go through to make sure that this was a safe place for it to go. Well, what they did is they actually, all the 4 boards sat together and watched my interview in front of the House of Commons. And they knew just after that it was coming home to the right place. It was coming home to a place that's going to love it, take care of it, and just be around the people that it needs to be. So what they did is they actually kind of tricked me a little bit during our Zoom call. I was talking to them about weather and all that stuff. What's the weather like? And I'm like, it's dark, it's cold here, and it's spring, but it's not really, that type of thing. And they're like, okay. And I was quiet during our conversation. We're never quiet. I was like, okay, something's going on, something's happening here. And then they said that they had watched my video that was in front of the House, in front of all 4 board of director groups. And I said, okay. And then it was quiet again. I was like, okay, I don't understand why you're quiet. And they're like, well, it's because we watched it and it was passed unanimously that is coming home and it's ready to go. We're sending it home. And did I ever cry and bawl on that Zoom call? It was crazy. And so then COVID hit. And it was like everything stood still, kind of stopped. But our conversation didn't. Between myself and Melbourne and myself and the government, it was still going. We were still talking about things and how we're going to do it, how we're going to work it. And then when we got the free and clear, that's when I started the fire under my butt again, and we got it all going together. And I had asked a fellow Mi'kmaq woman from Deanne Sack to come with me. And the reason why I asked her, not only have we been friends for a very, very long time, but she is also a pipe carrier and she knows ceremony. And I knew this was ceremonial clothing, and it was just a good fit. She was a woman, right? Woman going down with me. When we traveled down there, it was like, it was meant to be, myself and Deanne, to go down there, and it was just monumental. When we walked through the door and we seen, it was stored in an orange crate, and when we walked in, I seen the orange crate, and I was just like, orange to us means, missing, to us, And so when I went over to the crate, I actually laid on it and says, "You're not missing anymore, I found you." So after we had seen it, what they did is it was in different sections and different boxes inside the crate. So the first box that they grabbed out, and it was the actual jacket, the actual robe, and they put it on a table, and it had a cover on it, so I couldn't see it yet. And then Deanne and I kind of stood together, and they looked at me and they asked me, "Are you ready?" And I'm like, "Are we ready, Dee?" And she's like, "Yeah, we're ready." And as soon as they lifted it up, it was like, I was just like, awe. I was like, holy man, look at this, look at it. And I didn't even ask to touch it, I touched it. I was just, my hands were on it, feeling it and just getting that energy and, all of those things. And Dee's like, "I'm touching it too." I said, "Go ahead, touch it." And then, we kept touching it and feeling it and stuff like that. And I looked up at, her name is Melanie, and I looked up at her and I said, "Is it okay?" She goes, "Yeah, it's yours. Do whatever you want. It's yours. You're taking it home. If you want to touch it, feel it, and understand it, go ahead." So I was like, oh my gosh. So then they started taking out other boxes that it contained the one legging that we got, the moccasins, which I looked at, and there was actually wear underneath the moccasins. So somebody did actually wear this regalia. And where they walked, I don't know. Those are the things that I thought about. Then there was a pipe. So on the pipe, it actually was made by a Mi'kmaq person. And on it, there was the muskrat, beaver, otter, and rabbit. Those are the 4 animals that were on it. And when I looked at it, Dee grabbed the pipe and she held onto it and she says, "I gotta hold this. I got to." And so she did. She held onto it. I didn't understand that, but that's because I'm not ceremonial. I don't understand the connection of a ceremonial pipe. So I sat there and I watched her. She actually cradled it in her arms just like it was a baby. And I was like, okay. And it was like a really touching, very moving. And everybody in the room was quiet and watched what she was doing. And she actually had some sage. So she took the sage because it was it was open. So when it was open, she says that it's connected. It was hearing everything that was happening around it for the last how many years, right? And she says, so right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug it, put it to rest, because the actual bowl and the stem are connected. So when they're connected, they're actually connected, and they can hear and experience everything around them. And she didn't want to disconnect it because they've been connected for so long that she just left it and stuffed it. And then she did a pipe ceremony with it as much as she could because there was other people around. And then she put it to rest. She put it inside of the thing and inside of the case and rested in the silk thing that was around it. And then we have a pouch. So the pouch that we have, I actually looked inside of it because I wanted to know if it actually had anything in it at one time or another, and it didn't. It didn't have anything. It was clean. It was all that. So I don't know what it was actually used for. I'm thinking it's probably for our tobacco or those type of medicines, but there was no evidence of anything being inside of it. We spent, actually the people left and they went and they left us with it for about 15, 20 minutes. And Deanne sang to it, and the honor song and such. So I stood beside her as she was singing and I sang along with her. And after that, they came back into the room and they were like, we heard you throughout the upper level of this museum. And tears came to our eyes. We could hear you guys and how much meaning it is that this is coming back home. And so after that, we met with some, what they call their uncles. And to us, uncles are something different. I asked them, I said, what is an uncle in your terms? And they said, my elders. And I was like, oh, okay. So we got to meet the elders that were a part of their board. And one of the elders is actually the one that pushed the repatriation law in Melbourne. And so he was there, and I got to meet him. And when I spoke to him about everything that had happened and how the whole thing came about, he gave me the biggest hug ever. And he says, this is only the first step for you guys. You know, there's stuff out there. There's only the first step for you. You're going to move forward, and you're going to help other people to move forward too, because I see it in you. I see somebody's with you, and somebody came with you and is behind you the whole entire way. And I was just like in awe and listening to him. So then I was talking to somebody else, and he came back behind me and he tapped me on the shoulder. He says, "I'm not done yet." And I said, "Okay." So I turned around and I looked at him, and he says, "You know, I have something in my pocket that I've had with me for my entire, like, I don't know, probably 6-7 years in my pocket." And I said, "Okay." And he says, "I have it with me because it's something that I have in my pocket, because every time I think about something that I'm not going to, in my head, complete or successfully do, I rub this, and it gives me the strength to move on," right? And he said he wants to give it to me. So he gave me it. This is his worry stone. So this actually is about, I don't know exactly what it's made out of. He doesn't know, but inside of it, like here, is where his thumb would have wore down. So I've had it in my pocket ever since I come back from Australia, and that's exactly what I use it for, to give me that strength to say, "Yes, Heather, you can keep going. You know, believe in yourself." We kind of feasted with them. We had there was a smoke ceremony that we had down there, I was quite taken back, because it's quite similar to our smudge, except they use eucalyptus leaves down there, and they use it in an open fire pit. We don't. We use it in an abalone shell, right? And so when they smudged, they actually went up to the fire pit and they did their feet. Same thing we do, our eyes, ears, mouth, feet, the whole body, right? But it's an open fire pit, and I've never done that before, so I was afraid it was going to fall in. But they just use their medicines, the medicines that are available to them. When it was time for us to go, we went back to the museum, and we gave the regalia some tobacco and all of those things, and said, "You know, you're going to have a safe journey." She did another ceremony for it, and it was loaded into a delivery, not really a delivery, it was like a fine arts broker's van, and we traveled with it completely. And so when it was there, they watched it for 24 hours, and then our flight came. They loaded it right off the tarmac, and when they did, they always notified me when it was on the plane, so they took pictures of it, and then they said, "Yes, Heather, you can board the plane now." Because in my belief, you don't leave things behind. You travel with them, and especially this regalia. This regalia needed us to travel back home with it. And so every step of the way, I had somebody on the tarmac watching it 24 hours. If I wasn't there, they were there. And so when it was loaded, they watched it load, like I said, and they let me know. Well, we went to Dubai. Dubai was a place that was the flight route. So when we went to Dubai, it was only supposed to be half a day. It was more like almost 3 days that we were there. And it's unfortunate because I had the person on the tarmac, and when we were supposed to board the plane, the people on the tarmac told my guy, "There's too much baggage, you can't go on," right? And I was like, "Oh no." So then the next day we got there. It was in the evening, it was like midnight we get there. And same thing happened. They didn't want it to go onto the plane that day. They had their reasons. We didn't know what the reasons were, but they said, "It's not going on the plane, it has to stay here." So me and Deanne were defeated again. Mind you, we were really upset about it. So then the third day comes, and we get to the airport, and of course we're very apprehensive that this is gonna happen or not. So we were up in the lounge waiting, and we kept waiting, and then we actually had somebody come around and say, this flight's boarding, you should board now. And I looked at the woman and I said, "Unfortunately, we can't, not until I get a word that our cargo is on the plane." And she didn't understand what I was talking about. She's like, "No, you gotta go. And me and Deanne were like, "No, we'll wait." And as soon as we got our phone call, oh my gosh, we screamed so loud saying, "We're finally going home. It's loading, we're going." But what happened was our person that we had on the tarmac was talking to a fine jewelry artist that was coming into Canada, and he had a room for the regalia to go on to his pallet. So that's how we got onto the plane, was because he allowed it to go onto his pallet to come back home. So it was so beautiful. And when we landed back home, we landed we flew to Toronto, spent the night in Toronto, same thing, supervisory. And then from Toronto, we landed in Halifax. And at that point in time, I had Ward Markey, which is the tour bus company that we have in our community that, does tours and all that stuff within our community. But what he did is he donated his time. It was like 1 o'clock in the morning, and he came up and he loaded it into his van, and we drove it back home, and we unloaded it into our center, into the Heritage Center. The very next day I came back, I wanted my staff to see it. I wanted my staff to see it because it was all bolted and all that stuff in, right? So my staff seen it, and it was just monumental to watch them see it. And because they have been with, Jeff actually has been with me since the very beginning. Renee came in about 7 years ago. So it's like that type of relationship that they had with this. So I wanted them to experience it. And then I opened it up for all First Nations Mi'kmaq people through all Mi'kma'ki to come and experience the regalia before it was put into its display case. And I had so many people come, so many stories. I've had the tears, I've had the laughter, I've had the celebrations, all that around it. And that's when I knew I did the right thing. I brought it home, and so having it home, it's just bringing people in left and right because the word has been spreading that this has happened. Very first international repatriation in Nova Scotia, and it's right here in Millbrook First Nation, right? And it's bringing people in to see it. They're like, yeah, when I go in and meet them, I'm like, yeah, what can I do for you today? Oh, I'm just here to see the regalia. And it's like, okay, come on. So I show them and I speak to them about it because it is something monumental. It's wonderful to have for our people. Every day when I walk in, every morning, it's like I have to greet him. I have to greet him and say good morning. Every morning and every night when I leave, I have to say, have a good night. I'll see you in the morning. So the day that she did the pipe ceremony, even way before that, when we opened the box, it was like a release, like something in the regalia had released and allowed us to experience him. It was like a feeling of relief. I'm here, you've got me, I feel like I'm safe. And since that point on, it was that feeling, that they are proud that we're there. They were proud that we're going to bring it back home. The regalia itself, the spirit within it, the spirit within the regalia is alive and there and wanting to share with us, how proud he is and such. So. And when it came back home, there was so much of that energy that actually was felt by other Mi'kmaq people that came in. Not even just the Mi'kmaq people, even the non-Indigenous people that came in felt different. The regalia is ceremonial clothing, so it would have been worn in not only celebrations, but also when we're mourning somebody that has passed, and then during the after the gathering, we would have a celebration of their life. So it would always be worn when there was an important thing happening within our encampment or whatever it may be. They would wear that because they were the person that holds the knowledge, holds the spirit, holds that type of thing. And they were the ones that we knew that if they were there with the regalia on, they were there because we needed them to be there. So that's the importance of that regalia or any ceremonial regalia that a man wears. Ego igande ha ego guandu dana he ego igande he guandu